Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work. And we love having authors with us. And so, Amelia, who is the Chief Experience Officer at Deloitte Digital, is it your first book, Amelia?
It's my first book.
Yay, out today. About a
Wait, I'm going to show
subject.
it to you. Hold on.
Yeah,
I'm very
please
excited.
show everybody. Please, everybody pick it up. Elevating the human experience. I love it. And this is a question that I feel like folks often think about, when they get past a lot of the logistics of how their work life works. And for folks who are here for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future of work. And our question today is, I'm feeling unmotivated at work. And so how can I find some sense of purpose in what it is that I do? And thank you for being here. Would love any perspectives that you have.
Well, thanks for having me. I think it's a great question, and I think the first thing I would say is just kind of leading with empathy, right? We've all had those days, and there are people for
Yeah,
whom, of course,
self-empathy.
and also for people for whom it's more than just a day, right? So
Yeah.
acknowledging that it can be a struggle. But as I was reflecting on this question, I think for me, it just a specific anecdote came to mind where I was struggling a couple of years ago where I just received some pretty challenging feedback. And you know how like you get the hard feedback and you don't know how to process it and it's really unmotivating. And so I was spending some time with a good friend of mine who is also a personal coach. And she was saying to me, it's like, well, Amelia, if you're going to continue to grow professionally, you're going to need to learn what it means to grow in vulnerability. And here I was thinking, like, no, she must be wrong because the idea of being more vulnerable at work is really scary.
Especially at a time when you've just been knocked down.
Exactly, right? I was feeling hurt. I was feeling sort of, as you say, knocked down. And so then she said to me that if I was going I needed to grow both in kind of head and heart. And that what she wanted me to do was to write down the 30 reasons why I was lovable. And I'll tell you that when you don't feel love or lovable in that particular moment, I felt like this is too hard. I can't do it. I tried to say, well, can I get my daughter to write it for me? She's like, no, I want you to take the time and write it down. And after many attempts, my list starts with, I am lovable because I have a warm smile. And I share that with you, Roy, because I feel like when we have those days where we feel unmotivated, sometimes we need to be our own best friend and speak to ourselves with love and kindness because our work, our world doesn't always show us that kindness.
Yeah, I love that anecdote. How old was your daughter at the time, just out of curiosity?
She was 8 years old.
Asking because if I ask my 10-year-old daughter that, she might be like 30. It's too many. There's
Too
probably
many.
more like that. I can't think of that many. And I think so. I think that's an incredible reminder for people. And I love the idea of forcing yourself to delve deeply into it because it's more than just a simple affirmation. That feels like a real 22 on that list. My guess is that it is actually really challenging to figure out how to just keep building yourself up and maybe you get a second wind. How do you think it varies? And I'm curious what kind of clients Deloitte Digital works with, but how do you think it varies does it vary depending on what job somebody is in? Does it matter if you're a software engineer or a chef or a therapist or somebody who's,
Right.
by the way, like doing unpaid work, care work or something like that? How do you think it varies depending on what the person does?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I think I like to believe that as an individual's worth is not defined by their job title, right, or the kind of the work that they produce, and that we are all kind of worthy, worthy of love and worthy
Sure.
of kind of exercise that my friend had me do. But I also recognize that there are times and places where it's a privilege to even ask the question, what does it mean to find meaning in your work? So, while I would say one of the things that we share as part of our common humanity is the fact that we are worthy of love, right? Reference back, to our young daughters that when our babies are born, we don't question whether or not they're worthy of
Yeah,
love. So
totally.
why is it that we start to question that for ourselves or for later in our work lives?
Well, I think that it's such a good point. And I'll say, I mentioned before we got on that we've done some survey research that we did with New America about what people value at work. And what we found is that only for people who make $150,000 a year or more does the question of doing work that is meaningful to me. I can't remember exactly how we worded it, but something like that, rank above things like earning as stable an income as possible. And so
Mhm.
sometimes you do have to have some basic needs met in order to just give yourself the headspace, but it doesn't take away the inherent dignity of each person, which should actually have nothing to do with even their ability to work. And I think one of the reasons why many of us feel unmotivated, I'm just be curious, I'll just posit this and you can tell me what you think, is that um, many managerial techniques that people have been taught in the past have to do with things like telling you you need to hit this goal in
Mhm.
order to receive something. Well, then it's like, then you will start to associate self-worth. Or, we've all had bad bosses who've used things like shame
Right.
as management techniques. And so I think some of it, like the answer to your question about why should any of us feel it this way at work, is that we have managerial systems that in some ways have depended on this fear of feeling like I lack value or lack purpose in order to thrive. I'm curious how
Yeah,
that
no,
lands with you.
totally. I mean, one of the things that I explored in my book was the difference between extrinsic worth, which are these external measures, right?
Yeah,
It's what your boss thinks about you versus our intrinsic worth. And I sort of I dig into kind of how do we cultivate intrinsic worth, even at times when we're not getting, sort of the external
of
validation.
course.
Um, so I
How do
think
we do that?
so what I've learned, so I think this is a journey, but what I have
Yeah,
learned is there's things that we can really cultivate kind of literally how we talk to ourselves. So is the voice in your head,
yeah,
that inner critic, is it kind to you?
sure.
Is it,
No, not
mine
mine.
used to, no, exactly. I mean, my inner critic calls me foolish girl, right? But
Mm,
I would never say that to, anyone else. So how about I've been trying to retrain that inner critic and that inner voice. So that's one very practical thing that we can do. Um, and then there's also ways in which we can, with our actions, to kind of reinforce, with habit, what it means to feel like you actually are loved and worthy, regardless of
I
what some of
love
the
that.
external circumstances might be.
Well, I really hope that we have more of that philosophy in the world. One of the things that somebody said to me that landed in my own journey about the inner critic is they said that if your inner critic says things to you that you would never say to anybody else, what it actually is a form of superiority. And most of us would not want to think that we secretly believe ourselves to be superior to other people, but it's a form of
Mm.
arrogance in a way that the inner critic is holding you to a higher standard than it would hold others. And I think there's something about that. And there's fuel, and then there's toxic fuel. And here's to finding it. I think maybe we'll link in the tweet here to the story that you shared earlier before we were talking on live about JFK going to visit NASA and hearing from a janitor that what do you do here? Is like, well, I'm sending a person to the moon. And I think that's really, it does show that even if circumstances are difficult, we all have the power to conceptualize how we see the thing that we do. And yeah, so thank you for giving us some practical techniques on that and writing the book. Maybe hold it up one more time for folks
Okay.
who may want to, type it in on Amazon right now. There we go, Elevating the Human Experience. And Amelia, hope to have you back. Any parting thoughts before we say bye?
No, just thank you for having me. It was a fun
Awesome.
conversation.
Yay. All
Take
right.
care.
Well, thank you. And for everybody who's out there, we get these questions from you. And so feel free to keep asking them and find us, wherever you use the internet, and to be continued. Thank you.